United States Navy overtraining pilots? Question.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Air Samurai.
Let me know when I hit the parts that are most important for this. There's
Hold
a
on,
lot.
real quick. Hold on, Doug. Wombat, do you know Levine?
What's the name?
Like his
yeah,
Phillips.
He was one of my students.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think he was one of my students.
Yeah, he was probably my student, and he 100% was.
Yeah,
exactly who he is.
Yeah, I'm 99% sure he was one of my students too. And I looked at his more recent photo, and it's kind of the goofy command when I'm like, he looks familiar, but he definitely looks older. But
No, I remember him.
Okay,
I can't remember if he was. Well, if he was one of your students, then it would have been one of my students in Kingsville, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were IPs at the same time, just different commands.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doug, I know this one's kind of a long one, man. You can.
That's a sweet picture, though.
That is a sweet picture.
Is that you, Gonky?
It's, dude, if it's a single seat fighter jet on a boat, it's all of us always.
Yes.
Prove that it's not.
Is it the taxi one wire?
The taxi one is for sure me.
It's pretty far up with the.
Looks like the nose gear's up in the air.
Yeah. Well, it's
maybe
he hasn't completed the task of slamming into the one wire yet. It'll come.
Next frame.
Now to the words.
Okay, so despite having the best naval aviators and aircraft at the beginning of World War II, Japanese planners failed to prepare to replace combat losses, and it cost them dearly. Today, the U.S. military produces too few pilots, eroding experience in deployed squadrons. It risks a similar path as Japan in the event of hostilities. Chronic shortage of pilots will plague the U.S. military for years. One reason is that outmoded training systems and syllabi needlessly prolong flight training and exacerbate acute shortages. Wow, that was a hell of a sentence.
I remember it, man. Smart.
Automation, like the U.S. Navy's precision landing mode, is assuming more complex flight tasks in modern cockpits with fail-safe redundancy. This raises questions about whether the U.S. military is overtraining its pilots, and if reliance on obsolete training aircraft like the T-45C, is it Goshawk or Goshawk? I've wondered that my whole life. Goshawk. Okay.
Yeah.
Is hobbling the introduction for better training, because this is not the first Goshawk the Navy has had. Anyway, the lessons from the Japanese experience. Yeah, back in the 40s or 30s.
Yeah.
The time required to train jet pilots has steadily increased across the services. The ongoing pilot shortage is a strategic risk for the military because it lacks enough experienced pilots for operational units. Part of the problem is that new pilots are taking longer to train and are entering the fleet slower than the departure of experienced one. This creates what a RAND study calls an aging rate deficit, when inexperienced pilots become the dominant composition of a squadron and drive up the unit's overall required flying hours for its younger ones to become more experienced. Experienced pilots require fewer hours to maintain proficiency, allowing more flight hours to develop inexperienced air crews.
All right,
Doug. And I skipped quite a bit to the part where they are talking about getting rid of carrier qual.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I can. This is a pretty long article, but I mean, basically what you read, he just expands on that. So what he's proposing is we're wasting too much time in the training command getting new pilots spun up. But and I don't know, Wombat, you were on the training command side of things. I was on the RAG side of things, and it always seems, and we've talked about this before, we were as far as the military just wanting to cut stuff out. And he brings up the point of the what's the new carrier landing system, Magic Carpet. So he brings up Magic Carpet. He said, hey, we have this new fail-safe technology, Magic Carpet, where we can take a brand new guy and he's got just as good a landing grades as an experienced guy. So why do we need to do as much FCLP? So, and he really, the focal point on the article is the T-45 aspect of things. And he talks about, for example, you guys made fun of the trimming the airplane, like you made fun of me with the E2. Well, it says, hey, every fighter they go to in the fleet is going to auto trim. So why do they have to fly an airplane that trims? Well, I read through that. It's a pretty long article. I read through it, and at the end of the day, the speech that my skipper gave me when I was a student in T-45s was he said the T-45 is the last airplane we're going to teach you to fly. He said the next airplane you go to will not be an airplane. It's a weapons platform. And
Correct.
you will learn how to operate that weapons platform. And I think that just my own personal opinion is technology is great, but you can say it's fail safe. It may be fail safe in peacetime. But as we all know, technology does break. Simple things, even like a radar, even a TACAN, right? Oh, my TACAN doesn't work, right? So, I don't. He was never a RAG IP. He was a T-45 instructor. But a thing I used to do, like when I was dual qualified, so I was teaching Charlie students and Super Hornet students, when we would do BVR, the air-to-air stuff in the sims, when I was on the Super Hornets doing the Super Hornet cruise, the sim instructors always gave me the option to say, hey, do you want AISA, mids, all the toys? And I said, no. You could just see like the students, like their anxiety levels like shoot through the roof. And I told him, I was like, no, I want the old radar, ABG 73, no mids, no nothing. We're going
65.
We're going.
Go
Well,
old.
you couldn't go 65 in the Rhino because it didn't happen. But we would start out, and those guys were terrible. And then, as things progressed, I would let more toys come. And then by the end of the event, they're just slaying everybody. But I would do that to show them, like, hey, listen, like, for one, you don't know, like, if your stuff's going to work that day. You don't know what squadron you're going to do, what equipment you're going to have. And it also just showed the disparity. Like when I would go do the exact same event with all Legacy Hornet guys, it was always a train wreck because we didn't have any toys. And we had the APG 65, right? So like, I'm a big proponent of never forgetting the basics, but I am also a proponent of not wasting time. But I think it's a fine line. What did you see Wombat in the training command as far as specifically? He does hammer down a lot on the carrier landing thing.
And I mean, I was a wing LSO when they really started pushing Magic Carpet. And I'm for anything that can make the safe and expeditious recovery of aircrafts be more safe. I mean, that environment of a carrier is the most dangerous I've ever experienced. Anything we can do to make it more safe. But something Mover and I think talked about a little bit, whether it was directly or indirectly, is my career is literally littered with things that have broken on my aircraft. I mean, the amount of times I've had single engines, electrical failures. And this is big time, like stuff that the book doesn't cover. Like the book doesn't go over a total electrical failure on a catapult at night. It really doesn't. I mean, that's something that you're like, all right. So the problem I have is it's got to be a little bit of both. And then sprinkle on top of that, the bureaucracy of the Navy. We don't do things quickly. We don't change quickly. Like, think about it. I was thinking about this as we were reading this. Like, why do we do the landing pattern around the ship that we still do today in 2023? It was because the original Corsairs and stuff, right? Their nose was so high, they had to keep it in sight all the way around the landing pattern. There is no real reason to do that landing pattern today. But it goes back that far that we're not going to change. I mean, they've tried. Remember, they did the extended pattern for a while, and everybody was like, this takes too long. Like, what are we doing? Like, let's just go back to what we're doing. So inherently, when you have such a complex mission and a complex world of carrier aviation, change happens very slow, right? So, look how long Magic Carpet has taken to really take. It's been a while. I heard inklings of Magic Carpet when I was at Kingsville IP. So you're talking a long time of this. But the bottom line is, what happens when you lose your helmet in a Joint Strike Fighter? What happens if you lose your HUD? What happens if they can't lock you up? Well, they always can. Well, okay, but what happens when they can't?
Right.
Like, what is the option? And this was something with Fat Amy I have a huge issue with. Like, remember from your past and don't forget those lessons learned. So, okay, fine, I get it. There's the haters, there's the lovers of it, but it's like you're sending a single engine jet to the boat. Like, what happens when
it stops?
That stops working. Like, you're not giving the guy. Have you ever landed single engine in a Hornet, Super Hornet?
Yeah.
Have you? Yeah. Same.
Yeah, I have.
E2, same. So the redundancy,
Mover
and I
has
mean,
it in the
Mover, I'm
38.
not knocking what you did. I mean, because single engine like Viper flying, like you guys had a lot of things you practiced to ensure you could do your best chance to stay in the ejection envelope and get back to the field, right? I mean, that was a major, same thing at T45. It was a major part of the training to do those, we call them different things, but high key, low key, stuff like that. I mean, that's a huge part of the training. That doesn't work at the ship because your airport's moving. So that's the problem with some of this is I think, ultimately the environment specifically of the Navy is what makes this difficult because all the people that have been there and done that, we're now the grandpas and they're like, oh man, come on, you can automate everything. And dude, I love automation. I fly an Airbus for a living. Like, I wish the snack tray automatically came out. The fact that I have to manually pull it out is complete BS. Like, I love the automation, but I'm not flying it in an environment like being on a ship out at sea. I mean, dude, you remember the days of, I don't know if you ever saw it firsthand, but you probably did, where like a wave goes over the bow. Like, tell me how fail-safe things are when they get sea salt water soaked.
There's that great
Not
video they showed us.
splashed.
Remember they showed us that video API? They launched what was it? A COD or an S2? And he's
They've
going
had
down
both. It was the S2 that went through, and he went through the wave. Yeah,
Yeah, the bow went into the wave and then freaking shot him right through the wave.
The other, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, when you're in that environment, like, what you're going to tell me
Yeah.
that all these programs that we talked about last week about how good they are because they're only $180 billion over budget, you're going to tell me they're fail safe?
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm skeptical.
there it is.
There you go. Oh yeah, this thing's awesome. And there's more than one that have done this.
Oh.
That's naval aviation. You fly away from that. There's no
Yeah.
quitting. You fly away.
Hey man, you just made a ton of friends in corrosion control right there.
Exactly.
Dude,
Hey, dude, it's not the pilot's fault. So that's my
Yeah.
only take with this. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think we're overtraining. I do think in some aspects we're probably undertraining because we were when I was there.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the Band-Aid fixes we're doing. Because like the bottom line is, from everything I know, the E2 ain't going anywhere. So
Well, and they mentioned in that article they're going to continue CQ for the E2, but then he was like, I think that's even dumb, but I mean,
it's
I
because
don't
he's
know.
never flown an E2. Like, and here's the bottom line. I did see that blurb on there where it's like the first time they go to the boat in E2, there's a qualified IP next to him. It's like, dude,
Yeah, I know.
I'm
know
sorry,
that.
and I'm not knocking anybody who's landed on an aircraft carrier. I'm not belittling it, but I still stand by what I say that my last trap in a Hawkeye was harder than my first trap in a Hornet, hands down. That plane is a beast. Like, it just, it's a beast.
Well, I mean, Mover, like, have you ever had any of your toys break on you?
No, it's always been 100%.
No.
It's always VFR, daytime.
Yeah.
I know that's a lie.
Yeah. Everyone's hostile. They're all hostile.
Everyone's
All
hostile.
groups are hostile.
All your missiles have a PK of 1.5.
Yeah.
Everything.
What do we constantly hear? Red ball?
Dude, so you bring up a couple good points, but one thing, we live this. Well, I don't mean just that part, but the Two-Fits is a great example because you take these kids, and I say kids because we're old, and they go from pilot training. They've been flying T6s with all the GPS, whiz bang, everything. Then they go to T-38C, which has a HUD and a normal seat and doesn't hurt you every time you fly it. And then you go to the T-38A, and they use that as a super lead-in to go fly the F-22. And as much as I hated that jet, it made everybody that flew it better because you learned situational awareness without all the toys. You learned how to keep yourself alive, right? It gave you that survival instinct. And I think that is it's just like being in the sim. When you don't have that fear of things are always going to go wrong, I think you get a little complacent. And look at the mishap we talked about before, the F-35, several F-35s, but specifically to the boat, where he didn't know what speed, hold, mode, magic carpet he was in after doing the shit hot break. I mean, that's something that's totally avoidable. Look at the one that happened at Eglin, where he didn't know, what mode he was in and ended up having to eject, hitting the ground.
Right.
There's a lot of good stuff with automation, but I think from the training perspective, it's all blocking and tackling. You have to train like you're going to fight Mike Tyson. You know, you don't make it easy in training. You don't make it easy at first, because you always go to the law of primacy. You go to what your baseline was. And if your baseline was difficult, you are going, you know, the David Grossman thing, right? You don't rise in the heat of the battle. You sink to the level of your training. So if your training is, well, automation is always going to work and things are always going to be good, then when the shit hits the fan, and it's not just easier to fly, dude, it teaches you critical thinking. It
100%.
teaches you that survival instinct that, hey, that one time in that T-38A, I saw a Raptor blitz through my block and I almost hit him. I need to keep my head on the swivel. If that sticks in their mind when they're in the Raptor now, that might be the thing that keeps them looking outside when all these gee whiz toys and stuff either aren't working as well as they had hoped, or they're working and they just, you know, they lose SA on something else. So
100%.
To me, it's you want to start out more difficult. You know, it's like the whole, you know, would you rather start racing on a manual transmission and go to a dual clutch later, or would you rather start with all the nannies on? Right. That's why back in the day, they used to go to parking lots and just, you know, wet parking lot or icy parking lot and stuff. And you learn the limits and then you can dial it back. To me in training, but the problem we have is in a realistic world, we have budget issues because the government cannot seem to budget worth a damn. We have airframe issues in both the Air Force and the Navy. I mean, I'm sure the T-45 is just as outdated as anything else. We're losing flying hours. You know, we're so far behind in the pipeline because we're stovepiping at every single place that we get into these situations where it's like, dude, it's either we have great pilots or we just have good enough pilots and we get them to the next and make it somebody else's problem.
And that's a shame, really. I agree wholeheartedly. That's a shame because, I mean, it's these, and again, I'll say it, and it makes me feel as old as you said I am, but like, it's these kids' lives at stake, right? I mean, this isn't machinery. I don't care how many F-35s we crash if everybody walks away from them or what. Like, I mean, it sucks and I'm sure my taxes go up, but like, these are lives. Like, we've all lost friends. Like, it's the human aspect, and the people that are making these decisions, I don't know if they remember that as much, that it's the, you know, go talk, and Gonky knows it. I mean, dude, you were there close. Go talk to the mom who just lost her son, right? Oh, yeah. Like, and explain to them why we're cutting training, please, because I'd love to hear how she responds. Like, I have a fairly good idea how, you know what I mean? And it's like, and you know, I used to make the joke, and people at the airline make the joke, like, oh man, the military would never be profitable with the way they do things. And it's like, yeah, you're right, because they don't have to be. That's not the job of the military, is to be profitable. Like, that's not the point. The point is to be lethal and to be the best at what they can be. So when the flag goes up or the balloon goes up or whatever we're referring to it as, those guys and girls are ready to go, period. They have the tools, the weapons, they need to go. And I don't care if that's aviation, on the ground, or whatever. And you start cutting that stuff, the only payback is live. That's
the mental toughness. The mental toughness. Yeah. I mean, dude, doing more difficult stuff makes you tougher. Oh, yeah. You know, it makes it. I mean, it's like what we talked about with the massage chairs last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever that was.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yes, there are some good things, but one of the ways to teach resiliency is to make it more difficult.
Sure. I think definitely in the training command area, like basic jet flying needs to be taught. And I don't think that it's a good idea to remove that, because that is the baseline for all the essay you're talking about, mover, all that is, you can sum it up into flying experience. Right. Yeah. So,
but there is a quality versus quantity too.
Of course.
I would argue that having global SA doesn't give you the same amount of experience as having nothing and relying on your own situational awareness.
Right. No, that's I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But
we used to, like in the Viper, you know, we had all that stuff, data link, you know, we would have days where we would go out and we'd train, let's turn it off, you know, and experienced dudes were struggling, you know.
I did that in the Charlie too. It was called a weekday.
Yeah, but
You're like,
I mean,
hey, no radar Wednesday, cool, no problem.
you would go and you would either, let's not have AWACS today, no control. Let's not
So
do this like we used to.
So at the end of my tour as a Super Hornet instructor, we had all the Super Hornets. So we had the brand new ones with all the toys, and we had the old ones with just mech radar. And I'm not a super fighter pilot by any stretch, but I would watch other IPs delay takeoffs because they couldn't get in the link. And I'm like, dude, these are can sets. I already know what's going to happen because it's on my kneeboard card. Like,
he's
I've
gonna be
done
right there in the mirror,
Yes.
and then right there in the mirror.
Yeah, the airspace is small enough. I can tell you geographically where we're going to end up. Like, but they would not go, and I'm like, but that bleeds over to the students because the students see that, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So that's, so I don't know.
Culture.
I don't know. It's, I agree with not, cutting out things that we don't need anymore. I don't want to be wasteful with training dollars, but it's a very fine line. It's interesting. I mean, he's got some points that I disagree with, but
I mean, I agree with you too. Like certain things, yes. I mean, like do in today's day and age, if I was going through T44 training, do I need to do, time turn, no heading NDBs? No, like,
right.
Let's be, that ain't happening. But
that raises a question: can you land Fat Amy on the boat manually?
I don't know.
I
hope so.
Should ask.
I mean, because that's the argument.
Well, but
right?
maybe not.
If the alternate mode
can.
is you can't, then why then you don't need to train to it? Because
I'm sure there's a doomsday mode it goes into. I don't know. It's maybe it just punches you out. It's like, sorry, you can't connect to the boat.
Sure. That's a good question.